Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ball-headed mosquitoes and bully ants. Nah, it's getting kind of old, ain't it? Anyway, a little bit too late. You know who I am. You know what time this is, and you know where you are. This is Black Magic, otherwise known as Shaka, coming live and direct, or by the time you get it, slightly live and direct. Doing the other side of ropes. We're coming fresh off a very, very hot weekend. Bittersweet. Um, For those of you who don't recall or just happen to be under a rock, um, this was the weekend where they had the hardcore reunion over in the Southampton National Guard Armory this past Saturday. And what would have been the main event was they found the homicidal, genocidal, suicidal Sabu unresponsive and unconscious in his hotel room just before the show. The good news is he made a recovery and checked out Sunday morning. On a more bittersweet moment, we did lose another frat brother the following day. More or less an unsung hero. He was a former tag partner of mine. In fact, we competed once down in Delaware for Maximum Championship Wrestling. He's been traveling in Virginia, the tri-state area. He was also he also showed up on a taping in Roanoke for SmackDown during JBL's thing in early in '05. He was also a co-title holder for the Global Tradition six-man title, which was a revision of the Mid-Atlantic six-man title for National Wrestling Alliance when we were in NWA Virginia. I'm speaking of Frank Etienne. I know I probably said his last name wrong. We knew him as Prince Malik, who suddenly passed away at the age of 31 on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. Prayers and condolences go out to Frank's family. Speaking as an original member of the Sons of Ra, myself, hopefully Anubis eases your path onto your journey to be judged by Osiris, and hopefully he finds your heart worthy to where you make it over into the afterlife. Rest in peace, my brother. Anyway, we were touching on last week small stuff. Some things you don't think about, especially during a wrestling venue. Now, if I'm not mistaken, last week I mentioned the whole thing about gear. They say clothes make the man. Well, gear also makes the athlete. I mean, I've said this before. Would you go to a job interview wearing a tracksuit? I know I wouldn't. So I certainly wouldn't expect to see somebody wearing just a t-shirt, torn torn shorts, torn jeans or whatever, and a pair of sneakers in a wrestling ring. It's not proper gear. Be honest with you. I know you have the patent leather boots and all that, but even to me, that's not exactly practical. You have much better. I know you can say a tradition is television, but you have more practical choices. Gym shorts, they're training perhaps, but no, they're actually better, durable type of shorts you can wear in the ring or on the mat or in the cage. They call it combat sports, so you can do any of the three. Just saying, there is what you call regulation attire. Even bicycle shorts. If you don't believe me, you can look up in almost any. Let's see. You can look up in any of the regulations for any state with an athletic commission, and they'll tell you what you can wear. I'm not kidding. It's in there. Just look it up if you take the time. If you don't, you really don't take the sport seriously. And it's just a subculture or something to do. That's not said it goes across the board. It's not just what the wrestlers have to do. You have people behind the scenes that help make a venue click. And a lot of guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, like I said, a lot of small stuff. I mean, this happens in the backstage of any venue. It doesn't matter if it's professional wrestling. It doesn't matter if it's boxing, kickboxing, mixed martial arts. Doesn't matter. Even grappling tournaments. You have to have everything coordinated accordingly. Okay? I mean, it doesn't make sense if you don't have your matchups correctly. You got somebody going in the wrong weight class, for example. Now, I know they don't really enforce it that much in our sport, but, I mean, would it make sense to have a welterweight going up against a heavyweight and it's not the absolute division? And that's just in grappling. Now, case in point, you might not know what I'm talking about. Okay? Give you a good example. In a typical wrestling venue, even boxing, even mixed martial arts, okay? Your two most notable people, one you see, one you hear. The face before every match is the ring announcer. He's the MC or the master of ceremonies. He's the guy that's calling everybody out. If his cards aren't correct, you got the wrong guy coming out to the wrong match, okay? Sound guy, same thing. He's got to know who's coming out to what. So they got to play off each other. If you can't coordinate that, you can all kind of disasters. I mean, announcer's got to have his card straight. Misspellings and all that. Come on, I mean, it's a misrepresentation. You have to take your job seriously, even as an announcer, because people are looking for that. That's the first line that hypes that crowd up, because if they're not too sure who's coming out, then that confuses the whole thing. I mean, if you have a timekeeper, who's keeping the taste for the match? I mean, if it's a 20-minute time limit, it's going 30, what's going on? You know what I'm saying? I mean, like I said, little small stuff, you know. But going back to, you know, the hardcore reunion, Johnny Logan and I, we did Top Rope Radio the other night, and we had for our guests, we had the international superstar Cage on, and he brought up an interesting point. It just has turned into another indie show with a lot of names, because reason being, now here's the point, and I think it's a very big one that he made. Okay, it was Philadelphia, sold out crowd, 2,000 plus. That's a given. But see, these are the guys. Okay, what's left of the guys. For anybody who forgot, half of the roster that made ECW what it was, and we're not talking about after the acquisition when Vince bought it about 10 years ago. We're talking about a good 7 years prior to that. Okay, where probably the only person that might have passed away, I think I had a roster, was Eddie Gilbert, because he passed away in 1995. Okay, because he was one of the guys who played an integral part in that style, because it was the Memphis style hardcore that was the signature that people try to emulate from the prominence of Extreme Championship Wrestling all the way up. If it wasn't for that style being brought on, if it wasn't for Terry Funk and the FMW guys, Atsushi Onita, Hayabusa, Masato Tanaka, Mr. Ganosuke, you know, guys of that caliber, the guys from Michinoku Pro, you know, Taka Michinoku himself, Great Sasuke, Terry Boyer Funaki, those guys, Grand Naniwa. If it wasn't for those guys bringing that flavor in, along with the actual technical wrestling they threw in, all everybody remembered was the chairs, the tables. It was more to it than that. You had these guys putting their backs on the line every time they ran a show, along with the guys who really knew their thing. And the fans. It was that chemistry, that synergy between the fans and the wrestlers that put that together, that made it what it was, that Vince couldn't emulate. Now, you want to talk about, say, the hardcore titles that the WCW that and WWF had? They were doing that as a direct slap in the face to what Heyman was doing, because Heyman was trying to do the antithesis of what Vince was doing. Whatever Vince stood for, they wanted to do the opposite of. And that's what made it work. That's how the chemistry between the dynamic between the fans in Philadelphia and the wrestlers put that together and made ECW. Now, you're beating a dead horse. You're beating a dead horse. So, I mean, half of those guys, we're talking a little over 20 years' time, they're banged up. If anybody remembers, because of those high stakes that were brought up about a decade and a half ago, these guys are in a locker room. And it looked like a war zone because they're that banged up. You know, this is why Sabu was in the condition he was in. It led up to that. Nobody saw that coming, but that's what they wanted, and they gave it to him. They put their lives on the line. This is why Just Incredible had to get kicked out of the building. You know, that buildup of those injuries. You can't go home again. It's not the same chemistry. It's not the same fans as it was in the early to mid 90s. That made Tri-State, Eastern State Extreme Championship what it was. It's a whole different concept. It's a whole different institution now. That was the institution of hardcore that was brought about. The little small stuff and all that made it work. Now, that helped them build these guys up. They went back and forth. Television, they're going to Atlanta, they're going to Connecticut, and they're going back and forth to TNA, and they're not the same guys. And they kind of bottlenecked everything because the guys that's coming behind them cannot be that relevant. They're not as relevant. They're never going to be as relevant as long as we keep bringing these guys back in to do what they do, because they can't do it like that anymore. You do it now, sure, you're going to sit up there and get the money. They're more relevant. We've been watching them on TV off and on for the past 15 years. The guys after that, you got the guys that's busting their humps that went from even backyard to get to where they are. The Ring of Honor guys, the Combat Zone guys that came behind them, even the dudes in XPW and the West Coast. That's what made the whole thing. Now that era is gone. There is no more ECW Arena. There's no more Philly scene. They did it so much over here in the city, it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and it's like, okay, that's it, no more. So now they're in the surrounding area. The little small stuff. Now, can we try to work on bringing back to wrestling again? Because that's what it says on the marquee. Because I'd be surprised if anybody actually can tell me the difference between a key lock, an S-hook, or a gable grip. Even the label bit, and I'm not talking about the label lock, and you know what that really looks like. Oh, by the way, the actual label lock is a face crank, guys. Look it up. But, yeah. It's good, like I said, it's good to go back, but you can't go home again, and you can't keep going back. You can't bring nostalgia down people's throat. That's what they got the doggone tapes and the DVDs for, guys. They can't do that anymore. Can you let them move on? Just saying. Now, I'm going to step off the soapbox and get down to the shout-outs. To my boy, White Trash Johnny Logan. We'll be back next week for another Top Road Radio, and we'll have from SAW. No, not the movie. That's the name of the company. We're going to have Hammerjack on next Sunday night, 11 o'clock Eastern and 8 o'clock Pacific. To my man Sick Nick out in Arizona. Down on the Gulf Coast, Mr. Bobby Sanford. And the chocolate shop, Mr. Marcus Gibbs. Holla. For my alumni, still in the Southwest, or should I say in the Southeast, wherever you guys are, Mr. Blade Walker, Scotty Bullwinkle, and Ghetto Blaster. Another ECW alumnus, but kind of like behind the scenes. There's a lot of guys back there you don't know about, but they have been around. Matter of fact, going up towards my area, Hellhound Cujo. Let's see. Who else we got? Oh, working our way up from the Mid-Atlantic area, going up to our area here in the Tri-State, the alumnus or alumni of Maximum Championship Wrestling, Massive Mikey L. Stanley, D-Line, the Asian Sensation, Aiken Pembroke, the Hellcats, Chris Nightmare, Trina Stratus, Pretty Ugly, comprising of the duo of Jimmy Dream and Adam Ugly, Grey Wolf, Haroof, to the Guys and Dolls over in Devastation University, Doc Diamond over in Jersey, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Alliance. Also, the Guys and Dolls over in Tamaqua representing the Elite Generation Wrestling. My number one son, there'll never be another one, Mr. Xavier Fate. Across the pond, over to the great UK, Mr. PT Player. Oh, speaking of PT, the new owner of Power Trip Wrestling, Dawn Holly over on the East Coast. PT Player, PT Standerforth, Drury, Woo, the Ginger Snap, the Milkshake, Miss Vicky, Mr. Jim, and Mr. Teetotaler himself, Tommy Stevens, the singing dice that's going to put you over to the guys over in Belgium, to my boy, Sir Robin, Lady Lori, Homeless Tom, Dr. Gangrene, Rob Raw, Wendy Alossery, Mr. Jack Demento and Thorax, collectively known as Beatings Are Us, over in Holland, Uncle Vito, El Villatore Toscani, Emil Satoshi, Rico Bushido, Andy Ethan Patterson, and Tommy, and Mr. Twan Kreft, and Hats Irnderdad. On to Deutschland, to meine Brüder and Schwester. Alles ist gut. Wie geht's? I'm talking about the two Susies, the one in Berlin and the one in Dresden. Dennis, Kathy, meine Tochter Silvana, Maddie, Sandra. For the people over in Pro Wrestling Eve, I'm referring, of course, to Yenny, Jazzy, and of course, Mina. To Andrea Bobbage and the Top Catch Wrestling crew, to the AWM crew in Lubeck, and Rick the Voice Valentine and MC Logan, and all points in between. I can't get the rest of you because I'm running out of time. You may not be in the top of my head, but you're definitely somewhere in the bottom of my heart, and believe me, it's a big one. Tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of The Other Side of the Ropes. And on that note, I'm out of here. Incense. Deuces, ladies and gentlemen.